Hey, I'm Seru. If you're watching this video, I'm willing to bet you know who this guy is. World's most famous hedgehog. Wonder how they knew. Sonic just kinda has a particular draw to it that few can really explain. Through all its ups and downs, I always find myself coming back to the games that I love and finding something to enjoy in every new release. But of course, we can't really talk about those until we've talked about this game, Sonic the Hedgehog, released for the Sega Genesis in 1991. This is where it all began, and because of that, a lot of people think that this game is a victim of the first game syndrome. Meaning that, because this game is lacking a lot of the things that were introduced in later games, that this game is just not as good. And honestly, that's where the conversation ends for Sonic 1. People just overlook this game because it doesn't have a spin dash or multiple playable characters or elemental shields or whatever else. But I'm here to tell you that this game is actually really cool, and it has its own identity aside from those games because it lacks those features. Now look, I'm not gonna tell you you can't play this game with the fan-enhanced mods that implement the later features of classic Sonic games, but I think judging the game based on that and solely that does a disservice to Sonic 1. So I really want to play the game and judge it on its own merits as it was released back in 1991. Having said that, I will still be looking at other releases, both official and fan-made, because of course there are awesome re-releases of Sonic 1, and it is cool to experience the game with features from later Sonic games. However, the main critique for this video will be of the original game as it released in 1991. So with all that said, we got a lot of videos to go with Sonic, so may as well just kick back and relax and enjoy the ride. I know I just spent the intro talking about how famous Sonic is and everything, but a lot of people don't actually know who Sonic the Hedgehog is. And I can't even blame them because it's actually Sega's fault why nobody knows who Sonic the Hedgehog is. For one reason or another, back in the 90s and even up till today, Sega of America has felt the need to completely reinvent the character of Sonic for English-speaking audiences. Because of this, I'd say most people nowadays, and even most people back then, didn't even really understand the original character as Sonic Team created, which was designed for general audiences worldwide anyways. For the sake of this video series covering the mainline Sonic the Hedgehog games, I will only be discussing Sonic's original character. Unless I make videos on the cartoons, the comics, the movies, etc., I will not be covering alternate takes on Sonic's character. Unless, of course, the games themselves include an alternate take on Sonic's character.
Baldy nose hair!
I am just waiting for those JP purist comments. But anyways, Sonic is sort of this dreamlike, inspirational guy. He's cool and confident, and he runs around the world seeking adventure and living his life to the fullest. He doesn't like to stay in one place for very long, but he always seems to show up where he's needed most. Whether it's to help inspire others, to save the world, or both. He'll run into your life and shake it up and leave it just as quickly as he arrived. It sounds super simple, but I think that's why it resonates so deeply with both me and many others. The way he lives his life without regrets and is always moving forward with a smile on his face no matter what is not only inspirational to other characters in the games, but it's also inspiring for us, the players. As cheesy as that sounds. I mean, look at me. I wouldn't be here making this video if not for Sonic. The foundation of his character is so strong it transcends the game, and I believe that's intentional. Sonic's even talking to the player on the box itself, if you read it, telling you to do what you want to do and to live your life without any regrets. That's literally what I'm doing right now and why I'm even making this video. And while many people don't really understand this aspect of Sonic's character, I do think it's one of the main reasons, aside from gameplay and, hype moments and aura, that so many of us hardcore Sonic fans always find ourselves coming back. Sonic is not just a video game to many of us. He is so much more than that. So anybody on the outside of the series who has seen the ups and downs and wonders why any of us are still here, I think that's why. I think I can say that that's why. It's the reason for me, at least. Now, I'm not going to make a habit of creating this kind of character bio type thing for all of the Sonic characters later on, because God knows that would be an impossible task. But I wanted to do it for Sonic here because, honestly, Sonic is my favorite character, and this is the beginning of the series, so I figured if we establish it now, then we won't have to talk about it much later, which will be important later on when we get to other Sonic games that don't really have this version of Sonic. But we're not worried about that right now. This is the Sonic 1 video. So speaking of Sonic 1, let's talk about that story. So while I find Sonic to be a very interesting character, the story itself for this game is not too involved. It's pretty simple, but there are some little nuances here and there that make it kind of interesting for the lore of the series and whatnot in the world of Sonic, so let's get right into it. So this game takes place on an island known as South Island, a mystical place that is always on the move and hard to locate, but is also home of the Chaos Emeralds. And someone named Dr. Eggman, who you can think of as sort of the opposite side of the coin as Sonic, makes landfall onto the island hoping to find these Chaos Emeralds by turning all the island's inhabitants, which are mostly small animals, into robots, known as badniks. Sonic, who has had many encounters with Eggman in the past, has heard rumors of what's going on and makes his way to South Island. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the story. Sonic heads to South Island, he stops Dr. Eggman, and he saves the day. He doesn't really have much of a chance to inspire anybody in this story because there's not really any other actual characters other than Sonic and Eggman. But you can kind of just chalk that up to it being the first Sonic game and there not being any other characters, so it's not really a knock against the story, but I kind of wish there was a little bit more going on. But for what it is, I think it's pretty okay. I like the implication that Dr. Eggman and Sonic have a history together, and this is not actually their first time meeting. I really like the world that they're setting up here. I love a mystical island that is always on the move, that is the home of magical Chaos Emeralds that are infinite energy sources. That's just really cool. And it's the perfect place for Sonic to explore, and thus it's a perfect place for us to explore as the player. Now guys, there is something I haven't told you about Sonic. It's a little known fact, you might have heard of it from someone here or there or whatnot, but Sonic is fast. But yeah, Sonic is fast, and that is one of the major draws of his gameplay. If you are good enough, you can blitz through most of the stages in this game really quickly, some in under 30 seconds. The only caveat, as I said before, is you have to get good enough with it. So what are we working with here? Well, in Sonic 1, Sonic can pretty much just run, jump, and roll. That's it. That's all you get for Sonic 1. And you know what? I kinda like it that way. Pretty much anyone can pick up Sonic the Hedgehog and play it from start to finish and have a good time as a regular old 2D platformer. And it is fun to play it that way. But there is a huge treasure trove of extra depth thanks to the game's slope system and how Sonic interacts with the level design. And this is where things get really complicated for these classic Sonic games. So I'll just start with the basics. When you hold a direction on the D-pad, left or right, Sonic will accelerate up to a base speed cap, which you can think of as about as fast as how Mario would be running if you were holding the run button. But you're not actually stuck to that speed. You can actually modulate Sonic's speed pretty smoothly if you just tap the D-pad rather than holding it. Depending on how fast you're tapping determines how fast Sonic will be jogging. This is because Sonic doesn't just stop on a dime when you let go of the button. He smoothly decelerates the same way he accelerates. The only way for you to stop more sharply is by braking, which you do by holding the D-pad in the opposite direction that you're currently moving. Now, Sonic wouldn't be very Sonic if he couldn't go faster than this, and that's where rolling comes in. When you press down on the D-pad while moving, Sonic will enter his roll state. While rolling, Sonic is even more susceptible to slopes, allowing you to gain a lot of speed if you roll down a hill, but if you roll up a hill, you'll sharply lose a lot more speed. This is how you get Sonic really going quick. The only problem is, once you enter a roll, you can't exit a roll without going into the air. So you have to either jump, or you have to roll off of a ledge and land. You might be thinking jumping seems like the best bet because you can do it whenever you want while in a roll, so what would be the downside? Well, the downside comes in with roll lock and air drag. Normally, if you were to jump while running, you would still have full control over Sonic in the air, despite him being a bit heavier than how he is on the ground. But if you jump out of a roll, you cannot influence Sonic's direction in midair. This means that if you're rolling really fast and you jump, Sonic will keep going very fast and you will have zero control over where he goes. And like I said before, you have air drag. Air drag slows you down significantly once you enter the air, and when you combine that with the fact that you can't control Sonic's jump mid-air, you slow down a lot if you let Sonic stay in air too long after a roll jump. So each move has a give and take, and you have to kind of factor that in when you're trying to speedrun levels in this game. And I would argue that's actually one of the game's major strengths in comparison to later classic Sonic games, is that you're more limited, so it is kind of harder to get a good speedrun. And you don't have any get out of jail free cards like the spin dash or anything that you get in later games. And that's not even taking into account all the cool interactions you have on slopes. I mentioned before that you can roll down a hill and gain a lot of speed that way, but that's far from the only interaction with slopes that Sonic has. Depending on how steep the angle of the ground is that you're standing on, and how fast you're moving, can vastly change how Sonic jumps. If you have a lot of speed and you're going up a hill and you jump, all of that speed that you had going up the hill gets transferred into the air along with your jump, so you can go flying. But do the same thing on a downward slope, and Sonic will rocket straight toward the floor. And that's just talking about your top speed. Remember how I said you can easily modulate Sonic's speed earlier by tapping the D-pad, and you have higher speeds that you can get from rolling? Yeah, there's basically endless possibilities for how Sonic can move in this game, based on the terrain and his speed. Taking this simple game where all you can do is run, roll, and jump, and transforming it into a physics playground where you can fling Sonic all over the place and do cool stuff like this. Now, I'm not gonna explain all of the different minutiae of every possible jump you can get off of a specific kind of slope, but I will go through a few tricks that you can use to gain a lot of extra speed in this game, starting with my favorite one, the loop jump. Loops are an iconic part of Sonic level design, and they're all over the place in this game. Well, they're all over the place in like half of the levels in this game. But essentially what a loop jump is nothing more than what I talked about earlier about how different angles on the ground change your jump trajectory. If you wait till Sonic is at the very top left corner of a loop and then jump, your running speed and your jump speed basically get added together, and you launch straight towards the bottom left corner of the loop, causing you to land on the slope, and all that extra speed you got from jumping gets added to your roll. And this doesn't even just work on loops. If you have a sharp enough hill, you can do the same thing. This is just one of the many things you can do with Sonic on slopes. And it has a lot more applications than just getting a lot of extra speed on a loop or a hill. Like I said before, jumping on an upward slope when you have a lot of speed sends Sonic rocketing upwards, so you can use that to launch yourself to higher pathways, which could be faster depending on the level. There's really an endless amount of things you can do with Sonic's physics in these games, and I think Sonic 1 uses this to a higher degree than most of the other classic Sonic games, because it doesn't have any of those get speed for free kind of abilities. Not to say those abilities are bad at all, I think they are awesome and they work great in the games that they exist in, but for me personally, I don't like to play Sonic 1 with a spin dash because the game wasn't designed for it. But for me, I personally like to interact with games as they were originally intended. And I think that Sonic 1 being overlooked simply because it doesn't have a lot of these things that other Sonic games have is kind of ridiculous considering how fun this game is. But having great gameplay doesn't mean that much if the rest of the game is not up to snuff. So how does Sonic 1 fare beyond its gameplay? Well, Sonic 1 has 6 full zones, and each zone has 3 acts and a boss. This means you get 18 full levels to play in Sonic 1. And this is where you'll hear most of the arguments as to why this game falls flat. Some zones, like Green Hill Zone and Starlight Zone, are considered fantastic, some of the best classic Sonic levels there are, but some other zones, like Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone, are super slow and blocky, not giving you an opportunity to use your slope physics very much, and not feeling very quote-unquote Sonic-y. Marble Zone and Labyrinth in particular are the big things people point to when they say Sonic Team hadn't really figured it out yet. Since Sonic is fast, there shouldn't really be any slow zones, right? And while I'll agree that Sonic games should generally keep you moving at a quick pace, at least if you're good enough, I don't necessarily think that slower paced zones are antithetical to Sonic the Hedgehog's gameplay, especially in the first game. Just think about how I describe the gameplay. Sonic has no abilities that let you gain speed for free, and you have to be very careful how you use his abilities because the ground speed cap and the roll lock can really mess you up. So what about that says Sonic must be going super fast at all times? If anything, I think Sonic 1's slower levels actually teach the player how to modulate Sonic's speed better, because getting a good flow in Marble Zone or Labyrinth Zone is actually really tough to do if you're just holding forward the entire time. These levels are sort of a barrier to entry for those who lack patience. If you brute forced your way through Green Hill Zone by just holding right and jumping, then you'll be in for a crude awakening when you come to Marble Zone. And if you still manage to make it through Marble Zone, Labyrinth Zone's even harsher. And then you have stages like my personal favorite, Spring Yard Zone, which are sort of a combination of stuff like Green Hill Zone and Marble Zone. There's lots of cool, unique slope terrain for you to interact with, but there's also slower paced platforming elements that you have to manage. I think this trio of zones right in a row is kind of mandatory for you to learn how the game controls, so you're prepared for something like Scrap Brain Zone, which is the final full zone in the game and is the ultimate culmination of everything that the previous stages had. You have the multi-tiered level design of Green Hill Zone, Starlight Zone, and Spring Yard Zone, plus the tighter corridor, more precise platforming-based level design of Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone. Scrap Brain is one of the best stages in the game because it feels like an ultimate culmination of everything you had done previously. And if you manage to make it all the way here without learning anything from Marble Zone or Labyrinth Zone, then I would venture to guess you probably had a really hard time beating Scrap Brain Zone. Like, it's definitely tougher than Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone, but it really isn't that much tougher, especially if you learn the mechanics. And I think, without a shadow of a doubt, Sonic 1 teaches its mechanics way better than any other Sonic game. And while yes, I do think later classic Sonic games do some things better than Sonic 1, for sure, I don't think that should be a reason for you to skip Sonic 1. If you really want to learn the mechanics of classic Sonic, you absolutely should start with Sonic 1. It being more limited forces you to interact with the game more, and thus learn how the physics work on a much deeper level. Not even just the physics stuff, it's also just the basic movement of Sonic. And I think it's clear that this game wants to encourage you to learn as much as you can about the mechanics because they included the ring system. This is effectively your health bar in Sonic. But instead of being something where you take a certain number of hits before dying, rings essentially act as a shield for Sonic. As long as you have one of them, if you get hit, you'll drop that ring and be able to keep going. And when you have a lot of rings and you take a hit, it's really easy to collect them back because they just scatter all over the place. So taking damage in classic Sonic gives you the opportunity to get more rings so you can take more hits. It's a super forgiving system, but it is built around trying to master the game's mechanics. It's honestly really hard to die in classic Sonic unless you get crushed or something. So the rings prevent you from dying, and the less times you die, the more time you can just spend playing more Sonic. They are practically begging you to get better at their game. I will never ever say that this game is perfect because of things that I will talk about in a second, but I will always defend the stages and the gameplay of Sonic 1. Speaking of the other stuff that's in this game, of course, we have the bosses against Dr. Eggman. Every third act of a zone ends with a boss with Dr. Eggman, and that's pretty standard 2D platformer stuff, only these bosses are really bad. Actually, that's also pretty standard 2D platformer stuff. Never mind. But I think it's especially bad with Sonic because of the forgiving mechanics that we talked about before. Like I said before, when you take a hit, all your rings scatter all over the place, so it's really easy to get more rings again. And something I didn't talk about before, anytime Sonic is in ball mode, he cannot take contact damage. This pretty much means that you can just jump into the boss as fast and as quickly as you want and not really be at risk of dying because you can just take a hit and re-grab your rings to keep spamming hits into the boss, and you only have to hit him 8 times, so as long as you have even a little bit of rings, it's very unlikely that you would lose to any of the bosses in this game, aside from like the Labyrinth Zone boss, which is a platforming section, or the final boss, which is a crusher boss that you can't spam hits on. So for me, honestly, the boss fights are just kind of there and they don't really do anything for me, so I kind of would rather them not be there. But because they're so easy, it's hard to count them as like a downside for the game because you can kind of just ignore them and deal with them super quickly. But since it's something you have to deal with in every zone, it can be somewhat of a pace breaker. Not as bad of a pace breaker as the special stages. Special stages in Classic Sonic are essentially a bonus game mode where you can get the Chaos Emeralds from the story, and while I do enjoy them in later Sonic games, Sonic 1 is one of the ones where I actually really don't like the special stages. So how do you enter a special stage? All you have to do is end an act that doesn't end with a boss, with 50 rings or more, and jump into the big special ring. Upon doing so, you'll enter a stage that has completely different gameplay from the rest of the game. And in the case of Sonic 1, it is a 2D rotating maze where you're stuck in ball mode and have to manage really odd feeling physics to navigate to and collect the Chaos Emerald. But of course, there are obstacles in the way. There's more normal stuff like the bumpers, which you see in Spring Yard Zone, which just kind of bounce Sonic around. But there are also little crystals that you have to break by just keeping contact with them for long enough. And there are these up-down obstacles. Touching the one that says up causes the stage to start rotating faster, and touching the one that says down causes the stage to rotate slower. There are also these goal signs. If you touch a goal sign, you lose your chance to get a Chaos Emerald. So you couple that with the difficult controls, the other various obstacles that are around, and these special stages are actually really, really tough. But I would say they're kind of more annoying than challenging. And I will say, once you get good at these special stages, they can be pretty fun. But it can also just be really frustrating if you're stuck in one of these for a long time because you just can't get Sonic to the Chaos Emerald, even though it's right there, but the stage just keeps rotating and you keep messing up your jumps, and suddenly it's been a minute and a half and you're stuck in the special stage panicking because you've been so close to grabbing the emerald and you can't grab it, and it just keeps going and going and going, and then suddenly you hit a goalpost and then you're done. And you lost one of your 10 chances to get 6 Chaos Emeralds. So while they can be fun if you get good at them, you're only going to get good at them after you've played this game like 100 times, because there's no way to play them in the menu, and you essentially have to do a full playthrough of a game, being very careful, keeping your 50 rings, to even get an attempt at one. And based on how most of the rest of the game, aside from bosses, is so tightly designed, for me, it just doesn't really feel worth it to go after the special stages in this game. But if you manage to get all 6 emeralds, what do you get? Well, some flowers appear at the end of the game, and there's like a little extra animation of Sonic, losing the Chaos Emeralds. And instead of juggling Chaos Emeralds at the end, Eggman is angrily jumping on the end sign. So, yeah, there's not really any reason to go for the Chaos Emeralds in this game. The special stages and the Chaos Emeralds honestly just feel tacked on for the sake of giving the player a reason to replay the game outside of just wanting to get better at it. Because you have to think, in the original version of Sonic 1, there are no save files, so you have to just play through the game from start to finish like any other 2D platformer at the time. And if you game over, you have to start over, and if you beat the game, you also have to start over. So unless you like playing this game from start to finish, it is kind of lacking in replay value. Unless, of course, you play some of the later releases that let you choose whatever stage you want to play at any given time. I don't have this problem because for all of the classic Sonic games, I love playing them from start to finish and slowly improving my skills at them. And for me, that is the ultimate fun of classic Sonic, is just playing it over and over and over again. Learning about all the little nooks and crannies of every stage, all the secret paths, all the different hills you can use for slope jumps and stuff, where there are hidden lives or ring capsules or whatever else you can think of. That is how I like to play classic Sonic. And I think you're actually missing out if you don't replay a Sonic game at least a few times, because all Sonic games get so much better the more you play them. And to me, that's kind of the beauty of the Sonic gameplay. Of course, I do think it's important for the first playthrough to still be good, but to me it matters less if I can replay it and find something new to appreciate about it. And for many Sonic games, you do kind of have to find the fun through the replays, but since I love Sonic and I love all these games, it's just kind of a waste to not try and find the fun in them. And to bring it back to Sonic 1 for a bit, I don't think you have to try very hard to find the fun in this game. It's got super expressive and fun gameplay. It's got levels that teach you how to be expressive with that gameplay. And while it ain't perfect, if you have a little bit of patience, I would say give it a try. And there are a lot of ways that you can play Sonic 1. Throughout this video, you may have noticed I had 2 different versions of the game playing in the background. The more 4x3 footage that you've been seeing is actually right off of a Genesis. Yeah, I actually own a Sega Genesis and I recorded the original Sonic the Hedgehog for this video. But you don't need to go and buy a Sega Genesis to play Sonic 1. As of right now, the only official ways to play Sonic 1 are through Sonic Origins or through the Sega Ages Sonic games on the Nintendo Switch. For the Sega Ages ports, they are a mostly fine representation of the original game. However, I have found that they're actually quite a bit more buggy than the original releases. So it's not really the best way to play, but it is the closest experience you can get to the original game, you know, without sailing the seven seas. Sonic Origins, on the other hand, actually contains ports of the remastered mobile versions of the classic Sonic games, but these are also quite buggy compared to the original remastered mobile versions. Thankfully, that's where fan mods come in. If you have Sonic Origins on Steam, you can download and install the Hedge Mod Manager and install the Ultrafix mod, which is a massive overhaul mod for Sonic Origins that fixes a lot of the bugs in the game, as well as implementing higher quality music tracks for certain games. I have not personally tried this mod out myself, but I would say this is the best way to play the classic Sonic games officially. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the kind of viewer you are, I will be making a video talking about Sonic Origins. It's just so weird and messed up that it kinda needs its own video in my opinion. But since none of those versions of Sonic 1 are really that ideal for playing it nowadays, what would I actually recommend? Well, if you're willing to work a little bit harder for it, there is actually a fan-made port of the mobile remastered version of Sonic 1. And that fan-made port has a mod called Sonic 1 Forever. This is the other version of Sonic 1 you've been seeing throughout this video. And for me, this is just absolutely perfect. You get all of the benefits of the Sonic Origins version of Sonic 1, which is primarily widescreen, plus a mountain of customization options that let you choose how you want to play the game yourself. So if you really want to, you can just completely ignore everything I've been talking about through this video and play Sonic 1 with the spin dash, the drop dash, all the extra playable characters, etc, etc. Or you can limit some of the settings like I have shown here to get a more original feeling experience out of it. Yeah, it's still technically not the original version of Sonic 1 because you have widescreen and whatnot, but for me this is just the absolute best way to play Sonic 1 nowadays. So yeah, I think we can say we found the fun with Sonic 1. Up next, of course, is Sonic 2 for the Sega Genesis. If you managed to watch this far into the video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. I have had this channel in development for way too long, and while I don't necessarily really expect it to go anywhere, it would be nice to see some people enjoying it. But with that said, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I really hope that you can set yourself free. See ya!